When people talk about Final Fantasy as a series, they talk about a couple of things. Oversized swords, the amazing music, lengthy summoning animations, the groundbreaking visuals, and sulking, spiky-haired boys. If you're lucky, they talk about an entry before 7, and on a red letter day, people talk about the very first game in the series. You will hear mention of the fact that Hironobu Sakaguchi created the series as a last-ditch effort to save the company and his career. Turns out that wasn't quite true. The devs just wanted a name that abbreviated to FF, but that won't stop people from always mentioning that little factoid until the end of time. Anyways, forget that. When people talk about Final Fantasy I, it's more because of its legacy rather than the game itself. Final Fantasy introduced so many cool ideas and design choices, most of which continued throughout the series. Unfortunately, many aspects of the game are buggy and sort of poorly implemented. Maybe it's not fair to expect much from a game released in 1987. It's busted in areas, but it's not like it's an unplayable mess or anything. It's a fun game with some cool stuff going on for its era. It's just sort of a broken time sink.
Oh god, all my time is leaking! It's leaking on the floor all the time!
The game begins with the player choosing 4 characters from 6 different classes: Fighter, Black Belt, Thief, Black Mage, White Mage, and Red Mage. This is actually an aspect of the game I really enjoy. For your playthrough, you can choose any 4, so it's twice as good as a Mick Pick 2, but just less diarrhea. Want 4 Red Mages? You can do that. Want a challenge? You could go all 4 White Mages. Do you hate yourself? Pick 4 Thieves. You can make a diverse team that covers all the bases, or a weirdo team for a challenge. Once you've rolled class and named your characters, you are committed to those classes for the whole run. I find that adds to replayability.
I'm loving it.
The catch, however, is that not all the classes have the same utility. The Fighter is a tank that also has amazing attack. They are gear dependent, but once you have the gear you need, you're kinda set. Fighters are maybe the best class in the game because they hardly take any damage and deal so much damage in return without using any precious resources. Fighters upgrade to the Knight class, and once knighted, they can use very basic white magic. Black Belts are the token Eastern influence in this European-inspired world. They do melee damage like the Fighter, but require less upkeep. In fact, at a certain point, it's actually better if you don't give them any weapons. Unlike every other class, an unarmed Black Belt has a different damage calculation that ends up making them badasses that just punch demons to death. On top of the ridiculous attack shenanigans, they also have this weird glitch going on with armor, where upon leveling up, the Black Belt's defense rating is miscalculated and is only corrected if you open up the armor screen. Instead of the game checking for the normal defense value for the armor, it assigns the Black Belt his character level as his defense rating. It's so broken, but in a pretty beneficial way. The Black Belt eventually upgrades into the Master class, and the Master class doesn't really gain a whole lot of new utility, they just continue to punch things incredibly well. Thieves are supposed to be quick damage dealers. Unfortunately, they suck. You would be better served picking a Fighter or Red Mage in nearly every instance. They can't even steal things. A thief who doesn't steal? What? What the fuck? They're good at fleeing, but I'd rather win my fights than run away. On the bright side, they do turn into ninjas upon class upgrade, which means they can equip much better gear. They also get the ability to cast low-tier black magic. The Black Mage is cool, but a little frustrating to use. They have awful attack. By the time the Black Mage has swung at an enemy for 6 turns, the Fighter could have killed it in 1. Really, the Black Mage sits around until there's a boss or big group, and then casts a spell for big multi-target damage. Not really efficient, but it's fun to look at. Once upgraded to the Black Wizard, they can use all of the game's black magic. The award for coolest outfit goes to the White Mage, who suffers from many of the same problems as the Black Mage, but instead of damage-dealing dark magic, their holy magic is more focused on helping the party or dealing damage to the undead. Typically, when a party member perishes, they have to be revived at a church all the way back in a village, which makes the white magic spell, Life, the most useful spell in the game. Once upgraded to a White Wizard, they can use all of the game's white magic. Jack of all trades, master of none, though oftentimes better than master of one, is a perfect phrase for the Red Mage. They sport decent attack and the ability to use both black and white magic. The drawback is that in the highly competitive job market, red mage's bachelor degree can't compete with fighter's doctorate in sword swinging, though due to some stat bugs, the spells the red mage can actually learn are just as effective as when a black mage or white mage casts them. The red mage is great because he kind of is a bit of everything. Once upgraded, the red mage becomes the red wizard, and as the red wizard, you can learn higher tier magic spells, including the incredibly useful spell Life, which is a real lifesaver. You would think that being a menu-based game, Final Fantasy would have aged well. Unfortunately, the game is unbalanced, and even the menus can be tedious to deal with. Unlike later games in this series, Final Fantasy I doesn't use a traditional MP system for magic casting. Instead, it copies the Dungeons & Dragons magic system, where each magic school has 8 levels of spells. You buy the spells at a shop. You can learn up to 3 spells per level. Each level of magic has a limited amount of charges, meaning if you have 5 charges of level 3 spells, and you cast Fire 2, which is a level 3 spell, 5 times, you cannot cast Lit 2, because this is also a level 3 spell, and you used up your charges. But you could cast Lit or Fire, which are level 1 spells, or Fire 3 or Warp, which are level 5 spells. You confused? Magic can only be recharged at an inn or with a house item, so no ethers you can pop mid-dungeon to cast more spells. In theory, this could be an interesting mechanic, but spells would need to be buffed significantly. As the game is, attacks from dedicated melee classes outdamage magic without consuming resources. When Final Fantasy I was remade for other consoles later on, they introduced a conventional MP system as well as MP restoring ethers. This allows you to get much more use out of your mages, but I don't think that's necessarily the way to go either, since it made magic trivial to utilize. While flawed in the original game, it could have been reworked rather than replaced. I like the idea of having to prepare for a dungeon, and a well-balanced version of Final Fantasy's spell levels and magic charges could add a layer of decision-making and management. My recent playthrough was with a fighter, black belt, white mage, and black mage. In every battle I wished I picked a red mage or fighter over the black mage, and maybe even over the white mage. She has like 5 useful spells. The magic system kind of discourages experimentation, which is a shame because it's magic. Magic should be, fun and exciting to use. When you cast spells, it should feel powerful and interesting, but it's just kind of generic. Just not that exciting. Kind of bland. Like a potato with nothing on it. Just no salt, no pepper, no sour cream, no butter. Just a boring ass potato. Not even cooked, just raw. Just biting into that raw potato. When I made my party, in my head, fighter and black belt were there to protect the mages, while the mages were lighting dudes up. But you don't really get to do that. We get 2 extremes. In the remakes, the magic system is too liberal. There's no consequence for casting magic as long as you can afford ethers, and in the NES original, magic that is too conservative, to the point that I'd rather just pick a different class than a dedicated mage, just because they're so goddamn inefficient. The gameplay has a lot of issues that are the result of bugs or just poor design, some of which I will list right now. If a foe is defeated in battle and another party member was told to attack, they will spend the turn whiffing their attack instead of auto-targeting another enemy. The intelligence stat does nothing, which makes some attack spells obsolete late game because they never get more powerful. Many player spells do nothing and sometimes actually help out the enemy. Some swords are supposed to do elemental damage, but they don't. Fleeing is bugged for character slots 3 and 4, making it harder for them to run away. Being inflicted with a status effect reorganizes the party lineup. You could end up with a character with weaker defense placed in the front lines. Using a healing item in a menu boots you back a page, so you have to reselect the item and the person you want to use it on. Heals only restore somewhere between 10 to 30 HP. Heal the item is a different effect than heal the spell. The house item restores HP and magic charges, but only restores the magic charges after saving the game, meaning if you quit out and reload, you don't restore your magic. Among the bad glitches, we do get the occasional glitch that works out in the player's favor, like the Black Belt or Peninsula of Power, which became something of a mainstay for the series. The Peninsula of Power is a small bit of land located on an innocuous peninsula where the player can fight very strong monsters way too early. With the right setup, the player can grind tons of XP and gold. I found that the game conveyed information to the player quite poorly. You are doing a little shopping and have no idea if the weapon you are about to buy is going to do more damage than the one you have, or even if a party member can equip it. Other than what you can infer from a spell by its name, you really don't have any clue what a spell might do until you actually cast it. It's really vague. There's no little tips on the bottom of the screen, no information given to you when you buy the spell from a shop. You just kind of have to go by the name and cast it out in the field and see what it does. Due to limitations of the NES, item and spell names can only be so long. So you get weird names like Brack, Rub, A-Rub, Hell 3, Xfer? Crossfer? I don't fucking know. Unable to Google an FAQ back in the 80s, people in the States were lucky that a guide was included, which does explain pretty much everything. Unless, of course, one of those things is glitched, in which case, you're just being fed lies. Throughout Final Fantasy, you're exploring the entire planet, continent to continent, land, air, and sea. Each area sports new challenging monsters. The game feels open. People like to talk about how baller early Final Fantasies were about exploration, and there are some fun secrets in the game. But usually if you go off the beaten path, you'll get through a dungeon earlier than intended, reach the 3rd floor, and instead of getting any further, you talk to an NPC who says, "Get the cube!" Exploring one long corridor could lead you to amazing items that you can use, or an amazing item for a class you didn't select. Or it could just be a heal potion, which isn't really useful if you just used 11 heal potions after getting attacked just trying to walk down the hall. You could only save outside of dungeons, so say you took 30 minutes and got to the final floor of a dungeon, and you get wiped by the boss. You have to start from your last save, so those 30 minutes are gone. Now, I like a challenge. Penalty can sometimes be enjoyable in games, and being wiped by a boss isn't a crazy thing to expect. After all, the boss fights are the only battles which are non-stochastic, so the player has a chance to be ready for a real throwdown. The problem lies with the game's many random battles. Sometimes your party might just be wiped out due to instant death spell. Boom! Just by bad luck, you ran into a real tough enemy. You got a game over, or maybe just one party member died. If you don't have a white mage alive with revive, you need to walk all the way back to a village in order to get to a church to revive them. And not all towns have churches. This isn't a matter of getting good or just using another strategy. Sometimes 9 enemies just show up and they stunlock your team into an embarrassing and painful death. There's nothing you could really do about that. You're just kind of screwed. Dragon Quest, a contemporary series to Final Fantasy, handled the penalty of death in a much more lenient way, where the player would still keep their progress, but they would just be moved back to the last town they visited and lose half their gold. I find Final Fantasy's penalty of just losing all progress since the last save very discouraging. Great, now I have to do all the same stuff again, but this time I won't run into the enemy that can petrify me. Whereas the Dragon Quest approach would make me feel more determined to get a little stronger and try again. I think it's about time I talk about the plot. There isn't a whole lot going on. While the game has its charm and some decent weird world building every now and then, you aren't given much in terms of character. Your party is composed of 4 blank slates, the villains are all personality bankrupt demons, every NPC exists to tell you about the town you're in, or to nudge you to where to go next. 4 chosen heroes gather outside of Corneria Castle. The king tells them to save his daughter. They defeat the fallen knight Garland, who is sort of a Dark Vader clone, and the quest to restore the orbs begins. It's the most basic a story like this can get. Heroes need to save the world. To really get the audience pumped, the true beginning of the adventure kicks off with a fetch quest. Get the pirate ship, travel to Elfland, go to Marsh Cave, retrieve the crown, take the crown to the false elf king Astos, get the crystal, take it to the witch Matoya, get the herb from her, save the sick elf prince, get the key, travel across the sea to get the TNT from Corneria's crawl space, and with the help of dwarves, make a new path for your boat to travel through. Yay. After this arc, the game gets a little more interesting because you start to fight the main baddies, the 4 elemental fiends. The first one you fight is in the Earth Cave. In the Final Fantasy series, the Earth Fiend is always undead for some reason. Here he is a large skeleton man named Lich. In the nearby town of Melmon, they have been experiencing a blight upon the land. A nice touch I noticed was the many tombstones bordering the town. Liches cause some damage. The party makes it halfway down the Earth Cave, and they fight a vampire. This doesn't solve Melman's problems, so now you gotta walk 3 floors out of the dungeon, take a ruby to a troll in a nearby cave so you can meet an old man who gives you a rod so you can get deeper into the Earth Cave to put Lich down for good. The next continent over lies the town of Crescent Lake. Here, the player talks to the sages for a bit of exposition and a handy canoe, great for crossing rivers. At this point, the player has the option of navigating the nearby rivers to reach the second dungeon, or tackling the game's only major side quest, where you can upgrade the party's classes. I've probably sounded pretty negative about this game, but the upgrade quest is legit kind of awesome. In certain towns, there will be an NPC who's just a dragon and he's just like chillin'. The dragon mentions that the player can meet Bahamut, king of the dragons. Long story short, you use a floater to lift an airship out of a desert and offer Bahamut the tail, and the party gets jacked up. In every Final Fantasy, the moment you earn the airship is a high point in the game, and this game's no exception. Final Fantasy 1 makes you work for it, and once you get the airship, the world is your oyster. It's a really satisfying bit of progression. The next fiend the player faces is the fire fiend Kari, who resides in a volcano and is the least effective as any of the 4 fiends. The intro of the game mentions nothing about forests being set ablaze or the world turning into a fiery hellscape, so Kari ain't so tough. I think maybe she woke up after Lich died and she may have destroyed a town, but you don't really get to visit this town, so it's kind of moot. She does, however, have an annoying dungeon where the floor is lava! Get on the couches! Your health is constantly being drained, so every once in a while you need to heal up using the clunky-ass menus. Takes a lot of time. With the Fire Fiend defeated, we begin the next fetch quest saga, which spans several dungeons. Kicking things off, you need to fly to a small patch of desert, buy a 50,000 gold bottle, release the fairy inside to its hometown of Gaia. You are then rewarded the Oxyale. Fly to Onrock, dive down to Mermaid Town, investigate a treasure chest that looks like all the other treasure chests in the game. To get the slab, take the slab to a doctor in some town you probably forgot about, and then you get to learn a new language. Go to the Lefanish people, talk to the one guy that looks like all the other guys, and he gives you the chime. You can now enter Mirage Tower. You get to the 3rd floor, and you meet a robot who tells you you need to get the cube if you want to get to the floating castle. So now you have to get out of the castle, go find some waterfall, go get the cube, go back into the tower, talk to the robot again, and then you're on your way to the floating castle. You know how every retro gaming funny guy tells you, well, who used the note section in the manuals? Vague hints told you when you've hit a dead end in a dungeon is precisely when you'd use a note section like this. I forgot the doctor and Melmon even wanted a slab. The game wants you to explore, but since the exploration is required, it's kind of a drag. There isn't any wonderment, because you reach blockades in your path and say,
Where do I even fucking go?
If you do go off the trail, you are blocked. You need an item from somewhere else to proceed. This gating eliminates any reward for exploration outside of dungeons. Also, when it comes to exploration, the people in chests you get really important items from don't really seem that special, so it doesn't really stand out. If I needed the chime to proceed, the guy on the Fane that I get it from should be glammed up a little bit. Or maybe he lives in an important looking building. He could be the mayor or something. I get you're supposed to wander in the town and ask the locals for any new info they have. I sort of appreciate that you need to work a little bit to figure out what is going on. You're investigating and listening to rumors. I don't need a big crazy taxi arrow on screen at all times. Just a little bit of signposting would be nice. I mean, Bicky the pirate stood out. He's the only pirate captain in town, so of course I'm gonna talk to him. He looks important. Somewhere during the fetch quest, you defeat the 3rd major antagonist of the game, Kraken. Kraken, the water fiend, has been messing with the ocean, and the mermaids are in danger of turning into bubbles or something. The Kraken, being the water fiend, is, of course, weak to lightning. So get Kraken. Thank goodness we were there to help while we were busy finding fetch quest bullshit. We really needed to find that slab. Screw the mermaids, I guess. The Sky Castle you have access to following the lengthy fetch quest houses Tiamat, the Fiend of Wind. 400 years ago, Tiamat actually did something cool! He kicked the Lithanians out of their Sky Castle, took it over, and they have been dirt dwelling ever since. Sky Castle is notable for having a super boss called Warmech. You have a chance of encountering Warmech in the hall leading to Tiamat. It's maybe one of the toughest bosses in the game, and the first super boss in the series. All 4 orbs have been restored. You travel 2,000 years into the past, to the final dungeon, Chaos Shrine. In a bit of a clever twist, the game actually justifies its boss rush. Since you are technically at a point in time that you did not yet kill the 4 fiends, they're here to fight you. It's a relatively painless trek throughout Chaos Shrine, since by now the party is pretty well equipped. As the game has gone on, the dungeons become a lot less maze-like. By now, you probably have the spells Warp and Exit, which make leaving the dungeon incredibly easy. Now comes the best part of Final Fantasy I's story. Remember the Dark Knight Garland that you murdered at the beginning of the game? You may not, because he only shows up for, one boss fight and then vanishes from the rest of the game. Well, he's actually the main villain, because of, stupid time travel bullshit. He has a convoluted gambit that's at play. See, Garland is using a loophole to cheat death by creating a stable time loop. After being defeated in the first fight, the 4 fiends send him back in time, where he becomes Chaos. Then, he revives the fiends that you just killed in the past, so that they can claim the orbs to start destroying the world. The Warriors of Light have been stuck in this time loop because they can never defeat Chaos 2,000 years in the past, but they will always defeat Garland at the beginning of the game. The plan is always set into motion, but never pulled off. The fact that you play as the prophesized heroes is justified because you are the heroes from 2,000 years ago. In one really strange plot twist, the story has suddenly earned this sort of intriguing time travel layer. The boss fight itself is a bit strange in that it lacks its own unique fanfare. Later games in the series are known for their stellar final boss music, but Chaos, this demon who has transcended time in order to enact his revenge and gain control of the world, just uses the same song that plays when you fight a pack of Grimps. For a grand finale, the music kind of makes it a little flaccid. Though, when Chaos is finally killed, he does have a unique death animation, which was a nice touch. You want something that feels like a grand finale after a long adventure, and with what they were working with, that little animation adds a lot. And it is done. Well, that concludes Final Fantasy. It's an important game with some really great ideas, but it's overshadowed by its much more polished sequels. There's stuff there to appreciate. Just know it's a game from the 80s that lacks a lot of convenient features and relies pretty much entirely on its gameplay, which, as mentioned, is a little borked. I plan to review all the single-player games in the series at some point, and I'm interested in tracking what ideas stuck and which ones were dropped. Many of the classes, spells, weapons, music, and themes that are synonymous with Final Fantasy were introduced in this game. Things eventually get hammered out, and I'm excited to see those changes happen game to game as the series comes into its own identity. Up next, I hope you will join me with the black sheep of the series, Final Fantasy II. If you liked this video, please consider subscribing, leaving a comment, and hitting the like button. It's all greatly appreciated, and I hope you'll join me next time. Have a good one. Bye-bye.